uh, just like Israel, emerges as a key player in the Middle East and beyond, with close relations to the United States administration. And its ascendance to power seems to be, in many arenas, contradictory to Israel's interest. Moreover, quite often, we have to be careful not to step on each other's toes in this complicated power struggle and power dance in the Middle East. One new arena where this is relevant and evident is the Iran arena, with Erdoğan just preparing to host the negotiations between Iran and the United States, trying to avoid confrontation, violent confrontation between the two, reflecting the interest of Turkey to avoid such eventuality. So we want today to examine Turkey's growing strengths and what it means to Israel's strategic posture. We gathered here for this 5 experts. Each one of them is going to look at the issue from a different angle. First will be Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, who is a senior fellow at the JISS and an expert on Turkey. He's also a scholar at the Moshe Dayan Center in Tel Aviv University, following Turkey as this is his expertise. Then we shall have Professor Hüseyin Bağcı, who will give us a view about what's going on with Turkey, or about the view from Ankara about what's going on in Turkey. Professor Bağcı is a professor at the Department of International Relations of the Middle East Technical University in Ankara and works for the Ankara Global Advisory Group, ANKUDA. And after him, we shall have Colonel Reserve Professor Gabi Siboni, who is the CEO of JISS and an expert on military strategy. Then he would be followed by Jonathan Hessen, Mr. Jonathan Hessen, who is our expert in the JISS. He's a senior fellow at the JISS, and he's an expert on Syria and the United States. And it so happens that in Syria, both the United States is involved and Turkey is involved. So it's very interesting to hear the point of view of Syria. And finally, we shall finish with Professor Efraim Inbar, the founder and the first president of the JISS, now a senior fellow at the JISS, and also the head of the Department of Strategy in the Shalem College. We'll start with you, Eytan. Eytan.
Yes. Thank you.
What can you say about what drives Erdoğan and Turkey these days, and how much they form a challenge or maybe even a threat to Israel, and what is going to happen in this context in the coming weeks and months?
Dear Yossi, thank you. First of all, allow me to thank you for organizing this webinar, and especially for having Professor Hüseyin Bağcı. He's a very esteemed and very important scholar. I know him from Turkish academia approximately 11 years ago. It was in Netanya Academic College that we sat together, and then I was at the beginning of my career, and you gave me, some tips about my future and everything. So very much appreciated, and it's an honor for me to share the same platform with you and to deliver a short lecture next to you. So welcome again, even if it's on a webinar. Hopefully, in the very near future, we will host you here in Israel.
We were already invited to be in Ankara, so it's
why not? So first of all, as an academic who was born and raised in Turkey, I would like to mention and emphasize that during the history of the bilateral relations, these two countries, Israel and Turkey, have never declared hostilities against each other and never engaged in war. So this is very important, that something that should not be forgotten, even in those problematic days that we are facing. Unfortunately, during the last decade, or even during the last 2 decades, the two countries experienced very diplomatic crisis. We experienced two fragile normalizations. One collapsed in 2017, the other one, unfortunately, with the October the 7th. And now again, we unfortunately experiencing hard times. But still, when we are analyzing these hard times, we should not forget the good old times, so that it will, function as a light at the edge of the tunnel, so that we will still be working to improve the relations. However, even if I'm saying these optimistic words, I cannot disconnect from what is going on between the two countries. Unfortunately, after the October the 7th, approximately like 2 weeks, more or less, we can say it, on 25th of October, President Erdoğan delivered a very important speech at the Turkish parliament, and there he declared Hamas not as a terrorist organization, but on contrary, he tagged this organization as a freedom fighter organization. Until that time, we knew that Turkish foreign policy is a pro-Palestinian one, and there was no question mark regarding that. However, with that particular speech, we began to witness that Turkish foreign policy was upgraded to a pro-Hamas foreign policy. Obviously, this is creating a very important fundamental problem for the state of Israel. And then we began to see that the Turkish president began to deliver almost on daily basis anti-Israel statements. In my opinion, the most important one was delivered in July 2024. When he openly threatened the state of Israel by taking the same steps as Turkey took in Nagorno-Karabakh and Libya. He said, as we have entered to Nagorno-Karabakh and Libya, so we can do the same to Israel. So I'm only opening here a parenthesis, what Turkey did in Nagorno-Karabakh and in Libya. In Libya, Turkey provided ammunition, UAVs, and all necessary equipment so that the government of National Accord of Libya could thwart the attacks of the Libyan National Army. And if today we are talking about a divided Libya, it's thanks or slash because of Turkey. In Nagorno-Karabakh, we all witnessed that Azerbaijan could liberate the occupied land of the in the Nagorno-Karabakh. It was also thanks to the Israeli support, but most likely it's also was thanks to the Turkish support. So, long story short, when we are seeing and looking at these two case studies, we can definitely understand that Turkey is not looking for a direct confrontation with the state of Israel, but rather it is giving the signals that it may provide ammunition or support to Israel's enemies. And this is unfortunately very alarming from Israel's perspective. Besides these statements, in 2024, Turkey also launched a judicial campaign against the state of Israel and became a formal part of South Africa's bid against Israel in The Hague. And besides that, in addition to that, Turkey also launched economic sanctions against Israel, which was also accompanied by naval sanctions against the Israeli vessels. And besides that, obviously, we are seeing an unprecedented delegitimization campaign that is launched by the Turkish administration. The Israeli government, its officials, prime minister, chief of staff, are on constantly, in a constant manner, they are delegitimized. They are given various nicknames, of course, in a derogatory manner. And long story short, we are seeing that these two countries are entering to a kind of a collision course, because at the end, with the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. We are seeing an extremely important Turkish penetration also in Syria. And, in a very ironic manner, the two countries, Israel and Turkey, they are accusing each other by being expansionist. From the Turkish point of view, unfortunately, the Turkish administration is relying on some conspiracy theories regarding Israel, that if Israel is trying to realize the so-called promised land vision, which doesn't exist. And from the Israeli point of view, the Israeli decision makers, and including myself, I really believe in the Turkish neo-Ottoman aspirations. And when I'm looking at the map, basically, I do see a Turkish presence in Syria, in Iraq, in Cyprus, in Libya, in Eastern Mediterranean, in Somalia, in Qatar, in Sudan, in Caucasia. When compared to the so-called Israeli expansionism, I think the difference is very, can be seen clearly. As we can see, the two countries are a kind of playing a chess game on this chessboard called the Middle East, and obviously they cannot be they cannot ignore each other's move. So besides Erdogan's daily statements, which I call it a kind of a screensaver behavior, like on daily basis he is doing it. His mouthpieces like Yeni Şafak, Sabah, and other newspapers are demonizing Israel on daily basis. We are seeing that the Turkish state is also beginning to declare Israel, to label Israel as a national security threat. The very famous Red Book, the National Security Policy document, which was leaked intentionally by the Turkish state to the press, obviously labels the state of Israel as a state which is not respecting the international law, as a threat. Long story short, kind of an actor which is destabilizing the region. And besides that, in April, again, last year, the Turkish Foreign Ministry's official declaration of Israel, not only a threat against Turkey, but also a threat against the whole region. And obviously, we cannot disregard we cannot disregard Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan's latest statements in last November in Iran, next to his Iranian counterpart, which is obviously, as you know, the arch enemy of the state of Israel. He declared Israel once again as the most important threat for the whole region, together with the Iranians. And if it's not enough, in December, the Turkish Deputy Defense Minister İlkay Altındağ also declared that Iran's security is Turkey's security. And unfortunately, again in December, the Turkish Yeni Şafak daily appeared on its first page and again labeled the state of Israel as number one threat against Turkey. So when I'm looking at this picture, and when I'm looking at this continuously, unfortunately, poisonous terminology between the two states, unfortunately, I wish I could speak, really, I wish I could speak more optimistic. But I believe that the two states' relationship is getting more tense. And I wish that there could be some room for dialogue here. But when I'm looking at the heads of the states, I mean the decision makers, last November, again, a very important incident took place in Turkey. New arrest warrants against the Israeli decision makers were issued by the Istanbul court. Benjamin Netanyahu, the chief of staff, minister of defense, and other ministers and other officials who had jurisdictional powers in the war in Gaza. they are all they were all sent. I mean, their names were sent to the Turkish court so that the arrest warrant could be issued. So let me tell you, when there is an arrest warrant, and on daily basis, Mr. Erdoğan is giving different nicknames to Benjamin Netanyahu, like Paro, like the gang leader, the genocidal leader, murderer, etc., etc. So, unfortunately, I cannot see here a healthy dialogue, a healthy relationship that two countries is capable of sitting down and act like real adults. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing is the two countries are more engaged in mess. I mean, the politicians of both countries are trying to satisfy the masses. Okay, but in my opinion, this friction between the two countries should be lowered. Should be there should be a dialogue between the two countries, and obviously this obsession against the state of Israel is also um, influencing Turkish foreign policy. Let us look what is going on in Iran. Turkey, if I could speak about Turkey of 1990s, like the secular Turkey,
I just
secular
try to be
Turkey,
short.
yeah, I'm concluding my remarks, okay? Secular Turkey could be delighted to see the fall of the Ayatollah regime in Iran, because obviously for years the Ayatollah regime tried to export its own Islamic regime in Turkey. They killed many Kemalist secular intellectuals, and the regime in Iran was considered as a kind of the exact opposite of the bright secular Turkish Republic. But what we are seeing today, because of this prejudice that if the Iranian regime might fall and instead of that regime, there will be another government and that government will be pro-Israel. So the current Turkish government is doing its best to stop the fall of the Ayatollahs. And of course, there are some other reasons, like the disintegration may trigger the Kurdish autonomy there or another refugee influx, etc. So I'm not disconnecting from other aspects of the problem, but still, this Islamist point of view or neo-Ottomanist point of view, which is keeping Iran a weak country, and it would still survive, and because of its survival, then Israel would allocate all of its resources to contain Iran. So Israel would be busy with Iran. So Israel and Turkey could cooperate and could maximize their interests. And what a pity that we are talking about crisis and friction between these two countries. We could definitely speak about cooperation. So, dear Yossi, thank you very much once again for providing me this distinguished platform. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Chai. Professor Bağcı, it's your turn. What do the people in Iran, in Turkey, think about the situation, in your mind?
First of all, I'm also very happy to be together with you, with Eytan, Efraim, and the other friends whom I do not know yet. But it is very interesting, of course, to discuss now about this new complexity in the Middle East. And when you look what is changing there, the world is not anymore the same as we used to. So this is also the new world order discussions or disorder, new ad hoc alliances. And I think that Turkey and Israel and Iran, maybe if you get this triangle, it is a very interesting combination now. I would call it Bermuda Triangle in the Middle East. So it is it is very interesting to see, first of all, your question. I was in Iran in the last couple of years several times, also meeting a lot of Iranian academics abroad. But I was there 4 times in the last 3 years. Efraim Inbar was always saying, even in the 90s, that Iran is the biggest enemy of Israel, and one day Israel and Iran would fight, and he is right. Last year in June, 13th of June, 12 days war between Iran and Israel happened, and this put a new ingredient into the new Middle East power structure. At least we know how far Iran and Israel can go. It is, we call it to love somebody from the distance is the best love. So Iran is too far, Israel is too far, but Israel is considered as a security consumer country at the moment. This is the perception. Whereas Turkey is considered as a security provider. So we have one security consumer and one security provider. So Eytan was very good explaining, actually, that we had good old days in Turkish-Israeli relations. There are new 2 publications, actually. One is by Çağrı Erhan, Eytan. He wrote a very good book, 2nd edition already, about the Turkish-Israeli relations, how Israel is recognized by Turkey, the domestic reactions, international reactions. In the 50s, as everybody knows, that Turkey recognized Israel 9 months after its establishment. Turkey was so much under pressure by the Arab nationalists, whether it's Abdul Nasser or the Jamal Abdul Nasser and the others. But I do not think that there is a structural conflict between Israel and Turkey. It is artificial. It is superficial conflict. The state of Israel and Turkey would never fight against each other. This is my view. The rhetoric at the moment, both by Netanyahu and Erdoğan, is also superficial and artificial. So it is much more for domestic consumption. The fact is, therefore, I agree with Eytan. He is appearing a lot in Turkish television and Turkish press, his name, his statements. One of your former ambassadors in Ankara, we had a talk in your embassy in Ankara, and I said, it was mid-90s, I said, look, in 30 years' time, you will have in Turkey much negative image of Israel than you have today. Remember, in the 90s, all these Islamic movements were demonstrating every week in Istanbul. The students have been demonstrating in front of the Istanbul University because the number of the Islamist publications started to increase. Journals, newspapers, radios. So it is a culmination, actually, in the last 25 years, 30 years, that this is leading now to this confrontational behavior of Turkey and Israel. Therefore, the Turkish state mind, so far, I can only tell you, is not interested to fight with Israel. Very simple reason. Because the Turkish state, at the moment, the Turkish government has very good relations with the United States of America. You cannot be good with America and then be in conflict with Israel. It does not function. This is a rhetoric which, again, Netanyahu and Erdoğan, they know each other very well. And everybody would remember it was Barack Obama, actually, who was, there is a wonderful picture. Obama is with a baseball stock in his hand and calling Tayyip Erdoğan and Netanyahu, and he was bringing them together to talk. In the early 2000s and afterwards, we had very good relations with Israel. We had diplomatic relations, and so there were a lot of come and go. But the fact is, therefore, with the Abraham Accords, of course, you may not forget, today Turkish president is in Saudi Arabia. Just 8 years ago, Turkey and Saudi Arabia were nearly in a clash. What happened to journalist Khashoggi, and then also with the United Arab Emirates, Turkey was in very bad terms. With Egypt, tomorrow the Turkish president will be in Egypt. After Morsi, the Turkish president was saying so negative words to Egypt, to Morsi, and tomorrow they will sit together, eat and talk, and probably talk about a new military discussion. So the politics is changing. I do not trust anymore anyone as an academic coming to the conclusion. They say today this and tomorrow another one. So, but the fact remains why Turkey and Israel should fight against each other, militarily, I mean. That Hamas issue, Eytan is right, is also a domestic political approach. Even this year, 1st of January, there were demonstrations. People were on the Galata Bridge in Istanbul. But afternoon, we watched Vienna concert, Symphony Orchestra of Vienna, as the entire world. We are, on the one hand, very secular. On the other hand, the image is as if Turkey is becoming very Islamist. Don't think so. Turkey will never become Islamist. It cannot be like Iran or like Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, the Arab countries try to take Turkey as an example. Look what Prince Salman is doing. He said, I'm Atatürk from Saudi Arabia. Now, coming back to your questions, Eytan was providing me good opportunities to comment. Look to Muslim Brothers. Muslim Brothers have been very active in Turkey. And today, do you hear anything about them? No. Why? Because the president said, stop, shut up, and either you leave the country or you just shut up here in this country. When you go back to 2012, 13, 14, we had a totally different atmosphere. And today, Turkey and Egypt are very close friends, and tomorrow they will talk about the Mediterranean, about the new alliances, gas and oil drilling. The Turkish economy, the Turkish companies, they are running to Egypt. We are losing the Turkish companies to Egypt, and they contribute for the Egyptian economy. Hamas is a very interesting, I would say, question, and I told you, Yossi, I still don't know how and why Hamas was attacking Israel. I tell you this, 7th of October, it was the attack. 9th of October, I was in Madrid for the Mediterranean conference. The deputy foreign minister of Spain came for open the conference, and he said, we as Spanish government, we are unconditionally stay behind Israel. And look to the position of Spain today. Very interesting experience. I was there when he said this. Concerning the Libya and Armenia, Turkey is in recent years is indeed, because of geopolitical, geostrategic developments, Turkey is a modified regional power, but still not a nuclear power. Turkey is investing a lot in defense industry, selling drones and producing tanks and jet fighters, Khan. So Turkey is on the way to become not only as before to buy weapons, but to sell weapons. Turkey changed the league from UEFA Cup to Champions League, in other words. Turkey is selling weapons. This year, it will be more than $10 billion. And that Armenia, that Azerbaijan is supported by Turkey, this is true. And Aliyev and Erdoğan are good friends. But Israel is also a very good friend of Azerbaijan. And we know this. Israel is also having the channel, the link, to talk to Turkey via Azerbaijan. I said this publicly in recent weeks in Habertürk. I said, Turkey and Israel are speaking. We are not cutting all the relations. Even the Turkish embassy is open there, not closed, not closed. Here in Ankara, Eytan, you know better, the embassy, I'm passing nearly every day, very strong protection there. But, you know, we have a problem between two prime ministers and president, between Turkey and Israel. If Netanyahu would not be so much in power, so many years, and if the president would not have been in power since 2003, probably we would have much different relations. So we have two persons, you know, who know exactly how to sometimes also manipulate the public. So I do not believe, this is my view, that there is a sincere enmity between two sides. Now, coming back to this economic sanctions, etc., I know Turkey and Israel economically, they still continue to have relations. Even today in Tel Aviv, there are big buildings which are constructed by the Turkish companies. And, you know, the ships are coming and going. You know, the ambassador of Germany to Moscow, Mr. Graf von Lambsdorff, I asked him this. He said, look, I said, look, you have embargo sanctions towards Russia, so 15, 16 pages. And I said, what you do? He said, Professor Bağcı, yes, we have the sanctions, but we have other areas behind these sanctions where there we cooperate. So this is the case. I'm Realist School representative in international politics, and I will stay more radical realist, maybe in this sense. Maybe one more, Iran. Iran is important. Vali Nasser published now the new book. I'm sure you all already read it, The Grand Strategy of Iran. I read the book. I know even the son of the Shah, we met in 2006 in Prague. I know the Iranian mindset. I talked to many people. I was speaking several times to their diplomats in Tehran, in webinars. Here in Ankara, of course, I meet them. Iran is too big to fall, to fail. It is very difficult. But Iran is geopolitically and geostrategically is much stronger than Turkey. It is the location of Iran is geostrategically is more important than Turkey. We have all our neighboring countries. We have our relations with the European Union, with Russia, America. Turkey is making like this jungling policy, you know, so many things in the end, and trying to play to catch them. So far, so good. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan Eytan is a very interesting guy, because he comes from the background of Turkish Secret Intelligence Service. He was in all the negotiations with the Israeli government in the last 15 years, and now he is very experienced. He's not the previous foreign minister. He was just carrying the messages, but this guy knows what is going on there. And in the Middle East, there will be a conference in the mid of April in Abu Dhabi about the new world order or disorder in the Middle East. I will be participating. It's organized by the Indian Foreign Ministry and Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates Foreign Ministry. Why I'm telling you this? Now, Israel has its limitations. You're right, Eytan, that Israel is important, but with America it is strong. Alone, Israel is not so strong. Iran was very interestingly attacking Israel, and this 12 days war, it was so interesting. I was in Prague Security Conference, okay, 12th of June last year. 13th of June, you started the 12 days war. And there was an Israeli general, Mr. Oz, who was the one in 1981 in Iraq. In 1997 in Syria, he was bombing the nuclear facilities and also the Syrian important places. The conference organizers put extra meeting on that day at 6 p.m. So in the morning it started. It was not in the program. In the evening, we had to listen to Mr. Oz. I was there listening to him. And it was very interesting, of course, and everybody looked, who is going to win the war? But I can only tell you, Iran is definitely the loser through the developments in Syria, in Israel, in general in this area. And we know even today, some diplomats of Iran applied for asylum to other countries. Iran is facing a great economic problem. After 47 years of revolution, I think they are not able to fulfill the expectations of the young people, the expectations of women. And I asked the deputy defense minister of Ahmadinejad in 2023, I asked him this question. I said, are you happy with your revolution after 42 years? I said. He said, oh yeah, let's see. I said, in Tehran, by the way, the discussion is in Tehran, in his office. I said, if you are 42 years married and you don't know whether you are happy or not, then you are lost. So, but Iran is not enemy of Turkey, but not also necessarily the best friend. Turkey and Iran are two regional competitors. And this is why what I tell you now is something which I wrote and I said. It seems very controversial, it can be, but I said always in my talks, Iran's mullah regime is good for Turkey because Turkey is making this progress. If Iran would be a democratic country, in 5 years, 10 years time, they would surpass Turkey in every field. So they have good human resources, they have natural resources. Iran has a long state tradition, but Turkey is very careful, of course, not to go into confrontation with Iran because of Israel. By the way, Joseph, today the Iranians changed their mind. They are not going to meet in Istanbul for the negotiations. So they will probably suggest another place. Last but not least, I don't want to get too much your time, but in the question and answer period, maybe I can give you more examples. Turkey is a security provider country, is the winner definitely of Syrian conflict, but how much Turkey won is the question. So from, let's say, 100 lira, is it 100 lira or 10 lira? Turkey is not a winner, but not the winner. This is so far my view. And the Chinese proverb says, now I will pass to Efraim. The Chinese proverb says, if you want to curse somebody, you should live in interesting times. And I can tell you, we live in very interesting times in the Middle East, also concerning the Turkish-Israeli relations.
No doubt about that. Thank you very much, Hussein. You were a little bit long, but we are known by our hospitality, so our guests get a little bit more time. Let's go to Gabi. Gabi, you wrote a paper about Israeli-Turkish relationships and what Israel should do about it, and what are the threats emanating from Turkey. What's your opinion about what has been said so far?
Thank you, Yossi. I wrote the paper together with Brigadier General Erez Wiener, and I don't want to go back to discuss things that have been discussed. What is the motive mainly by Eytan? What are the motivation of Iran, and what is the situation of Turkey, and what's Turkey is what kind of, let's say, threat or provocation Turkey is creating for Israel. So I think we understand the picture, and one thing I know that I've learned, and you know that, Yossi, that I stopped trying to imagine or think that I can predict what is in the mind of the other people, like Erdoğan, the people that say he doesn't want, I don't know what he wants or don't want. I know what he does, and I see what we see in our area. So, and we see exactly what's going on in Syria with Turkey. We see let's say the east side of the Mediterranean Sea, the challenges that Turkey poses to Israel and to other neighboring countries, also Cyprus and Greece. We see what is Turkey activity in Gaza. What it's maybe not activity, but what are the interests, and where does Turkey, given freedom to act, how will it take it in Gaza? And also we see the activity of Turkey inside Israel, in Jerusalem, in let's say inside the old city of Jerusalem, with a variety of organizations and NGOs that are active under Turkish sponsorship and money. So that we see. And so I don't know what they think, but what Erdoğan thinks, but I see what he does. And one thing I want to say before I will suggest how we should react to this kind of threat, and I see it is a very big threat, is we don't want to change the ring of fire that was created by Iran, the Shiite ring of fire, by a Muslim Brotherhood ring of fire surrounding us, starting with the jihadists in Syria. I don't know about the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, but the jihadists in Syria that are still supported by Turkey. And I don't know the Turkish interest in other places, Jordan, Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood. So I don't know exactly where they want to go, but I see it as an imminent threat to Israel, and we need to respond to this threat. We cannot just lean aside and say, okay, Turkey doesn't want, they don't want any friction with Israel, they are committed to the United States. I don't know, I don't see that when we look at the geostrategic situation in the Middle East with Turkey. Now, what we should do regarding those activities. So, first of all, you know, the Gaza issue. The Gaza is a point of friction when we see that Turkey is trying to get a foothold, of course, together with Qatar, but we're not discussing with Qatar about Qatar now, to get a foothold in Gaza, both in the, let's say, in the council activity, but I'm sure that later on there will be pressure that Turkish forces or Turkish whatever, Turkish men, let's say representative, will be part of the activity in Gaza, and I think it's a big threat, and we need to mitigate that and to make sure this does not happen. Now, I think that Turkish activity, then if we go to the Syria, in Syria is very dangerous for Israel because Turkey is pushing itself to the south as we speak. I know that there are Turkish, let's say, I wouldn't say forces, but Turkish elements in the south of Turkey that are active.
Syria, you mean?
Please?
You mean in the south of Syria?
In the south of Syria, yes, sorry. In the south of Syria that are active and challenge let's say, the fragile security situation that we have there. And I don't know what will be the end state with Syria. How will we manage that? But I remind everybody that Turkey has conquered part of Syria, practically something like a third of the state of Israel, some 9,000 kilometers, and completely conquered it, which is the lira is the currency there. The Turkish language is the language there, and so it's become part of part of Turkey. I don't have a problem with that, to be honest. I don't if they want to conquer, but they should not try to push Israel out of the little post that we have in Syria to protect the Golan Heights in our side. So this is the challenge that we have, and we need to make sure that Turkey does not interfere with our security interests in Syria, which are mainly to protect our Golan Heights and protect the Druze between the village of Khader and the village of Sweda. We saw how the jihadists in Syria elected, and we don't want to see this kind of activity on our border and nor on the Druze again. Now, as I mentioned, Turkey is very active in the old city of Jerusalem on the Mount Temple. And I think that Israel is not doing enough to remove those organizations and to try to block them. We need to do much more than we are doing now, because they are sponsoring radicalism, Muslim Brotherhood, and other kind of organization, radicalism, even in Jerusalem, and we are not mitigating that in a proper way. Now, Israel is trying to let's say, to give force more to the Hellenistic alliance together with Cyprus and Greece, and to create some economic value for those states vis-a-vis this alliance, and we should enforce it, and we should be aware that Turkey will do its best to interfere with this situation. And the last thing is our last activity in Africa, in Somaliland. Again, there we see Turkey is trying to block, or trying to, let's say, to create some reaction to what the relations that we created with Somaliland, and I think that as well has to be considered in our decision making. All in all, to summarize my point, is that we need to consider our activities based on what we see on the ground with Turkey, and not based on what the stories we hear that Erdoğan does not want and Turkey will never be. I don't know what will happen in Turkey, but I know what we see on the ground, and we have to respond to what we see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabi. Clear. Jonathan, Syria was mentioned, but what can you say about the confrontation in Syria between Israeli and Turkish interests?
Thank you, Yossi. First and foremost, thank you for having me. This is obviously a very important topic. And despite the vigorous friction and disagreements, deep-rooted disagreements between Ankara and Jerusalem, I think that there is still a deep love for Turkey in Israel. And many Turks in Ankara and Istanbul and elsewhere have many aspirations to see relations normalized with Israel. So there is some type of optimism just in the sheer of that, with hopes for better days. But unfortunately, these days, there is a gap of strategic understanding on both sides with regard to the intentions. And not only just intentions, but as also Gabi has mentioned, and also Chai has mentioned in their remarks, there is a certain discourse and activities that are pushed within the context of that discourse that are challenging one another from reaching a overlap of strategic interests when we're talking about the Venn diagram type of approach, including particularly in Syria. In contrast to other areas, I do not believe that when we're talking about what is currently happening in Syria is just sheer rhetoric. There are true security concerns when we're talking about what is happening there. On the one hand, naturally, Syria is considered to be a very high priority for President Erdoğan's AKP and vision on the reconstruction project, which is naturally a source of expected large sums of revenue, particularly for Turkey's economy, something that Erdoğan has many aspirations about from an economic perspective. And the expectation, in light of Turkish intelligence and activities over many years, which is a long-term investment, with no little risk mitigations. The fact that Ankara has managed to take over Damascus, both figuratively as well as literally in many aspects, brings with it also a lot of expectations in Ankara that do not necessarily align with the national security interests of the State of Israel, to include, for instance, military entrenchment, the establishment of bases in a number of locations throughout Syria, including, for instance, the T4 air base that Ankara sought to occupy a couple of times. Israel's response was very vigorous, very strong, and the destruction of the T4 air base was a clear signal that Israel will not accept any type of military entrenchment of foreign actors, irrespective of who they are, particularly also when we're talking about taking out the Islamic Republic of Iran. Israel does not or is not going to accept any country that, even though its rhetoric might be artificial in the way it's being portrayed, nonetheless, if somebody says something about the fact that Jerusalem is an Ottoman city or all kinds of things like that, that is not taken lightly in Jerusalem and will not be brushed under the table. So when we're talking specifically about Syria, we do see indeed rhetoric coming out. For instance, the statements by Hakan Fidan claiming time and again that the State of Israel was behind and supporting the Syrian Democratic Forces, or Brig.Gen, part of course the various PKK elements that operated within those ranks. That was simply not true, and the events that took effect over the course of the several past days were proof that Israel was not involved there. It did not commit also to provide any type of support, and it did not involve itself in the backyard of Turkey, despite a lot of rhetoric coming out of Ankara claiming to the contrary. In contrast, we do see heavy IHH activities, both in Quneitra as well as Dera. We see that there is heavy intelligence apparatus activities in even in Sweda, in the village of Mazra and other locations where there are a lot of activities there. And you also see that there are various actors, to include the commander of Division 70, which is located in Damascus and is quite potent, happening to be a Turkish citizen, no less. The deputy commander, of course, the chief of general staff, the deputy chief of the Syrian army in Damascus, is also a Turkish or Turkic/Syrian dual national, also Turkish. And there are a lot of activities, obviously, that Turkey is undertaking, naturally due to the fact that Damascus is a project that Ankara really wants to see succeed. Now, on the one hand, from Ankara's perspective, it sees itself as a restraining force. It signals this also time and again to Washington, that it is restraining the so-called extremist jihadist forces from entrenching along Israel's lines and so on and so forth. But at the same time, Israel sees this as A, Turkish entrenchment once again, and B, it sees all kind of radical elements nonetheless sprouting out like mushrooms also in its backyard, with various allegations obviously related to Turkey's involvement in certain aspects there, particularly in low signature type of activities. So there are a lot of concerns with regard to this. Israel obviously has an open line with Washington on this regard. Turkey, on its perspective, also has an open line with Washington in this regard. And under the current administration, naturally, they're trying to, from Washington's perspective, to try and mitigate risks. They do not want to see any type of direct confrontation, and they also want to avoid friction, even though friction already exists, and it's very robust in its characterization as we see it today, not only in Syria, but also in other sectors. Another point that obviously indicates the intentions happens to be, for instance, taking the Hejaz line, the railway that Turkey has reached a trilateral memorandum of understanding to start constructing roughly 30 kilometers of railroad in Syria to connect Turkey once again to Damascus, and then to establish that same railway from Damascus through Daraa, very close to the border with Israel, into Jordan, into Amman, is also a point of concern for Israel. Obviously, such a railroad would establish not only as an alternative to the IMAC, which is a project that Israel was very favorable of, but will also establish a influence zone in Jordan, in areas very close to the border with Israel, and again, at a time when relations are not necessarily at an all-time high. To the contrary, obviously, Israel is not very keen on seeing those type of projects right across its border, and irrespective of the added value from a economic perspective in the various aspects, railways are known, or multinational railroads are known to be exporters of influence, and that would increase Turkey's influence along Israel's not only northern front, but also along the eastern front, with obviously Jordan seeking various collaborative efforts with the Saudis to connect that railroad from from Amman all the way to the Hejaz. The Saudis at this point in time have not yet acquiesced to that request, but nonetheless, that is being discussed behind the scenes quite vigorously. Now, all in all, we're looking at a situation where we're seeing a lot of involvement and challenges also in the diplomatic sphere, where there is no real bridge between Israel and Turkey, or vice versa. And the United States right now sees Syria as a buffer zone of sorts to try and, again, mitigate the risk of frontal confrontation between the two countries. The only overlapping interest right now in Syria is both countries seek to avoid war. And the fact that that is the only overlapping interest between the two countries is a reason for deep concern. And unless there is some type of realization that there needs to be a lot more overture, also from Ankara's part towards Israel, particularly also with regard to its national security concerns, even if it comes at the expense of the so-called Syria project, this may bring about the collapse of the entire Syria project. So the question is, do you want the entire cake, or do you want to, ensure that there is at least enough cake to be able to deal with in the long run and to garner the benefits out of that? I will stop there. I think that there is plenty more to say, but
we're running out of time, so
go ahead.
Very good.
Stop here. We'll move to Efraim, Professor Efraim Inbar. Efraim, what's your take on all these methods that were already raised? And the whole picture, where are we going? Efraim, you are mute. Efraim, you're mute. Efraim, he doesn't listen to us.
No.
You're mute.
Technology poor.
Oh,
Turkey is a country close to my heart, and I'm always happy to talk about Turkey. Of course, this time the circumstances are less glorious, and I think that we have two aspects to the relationship. One is ideological, and the other one is realpolitik perspective. And at the ideological level, unfortunately, Turkey represents, from an Israeli point of view, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Qatar, its ally, supports the Muslim Brotherhood, and I don't think that we'll be able to reach an understanding at the ideological level. And this makes Turkey not only an enemy of Israel, but an enemy of the Western civilization. And this should be of concern not only to Israel. From a realist perspective, I think that we are at a time when the balance of power between the two states has been destabilized. First of all, Iran was seriously weakened, and what maybe the Turks believe that it will occupy us for a while and not look elsewhere. I think that the Iranians are in trouble, and we see a security dilemma. The Turks entered Syria. We also entered Syria. And they look at it as an Israeli conquest in Syria. So there is a revisionist aspect to the Israeli behavior. We made a commitment, unprecedented commitment to the Druze communities there, showing that we have a deeper interest rather than defending the North. And of course, there are historical suspicions in Turkey, some of them unfounded, that Israel favors a Kurdish state, and this is a very touchy issue for the Turks. And the question is if the relationship will escalate to a military confrontation. I detect so far, despite the rhetoric, some streak of pragmatism in Erdogan's behavior and restraining factor. First of all, we still have diplomatic relations, not at the ambassador level, but there is diplomatic relations. Another very important issue is that Azeri oil is still flowing to Ceyhan to be shipped to Israel. Azeri oil is 46% of the total oil imports in Israel. And this is an important issue. And this is a Turkish leverage on the relationship, which they have not blocked yet. I think also that the Turks that are ruling de facto Syria allow the Syrian government to conduct Israeli-Syrian security dialogue to reach a security understanding. Basically, it is a Turkish-Israeli, not directly, Turkish-Israeli attempt to reach maybe understandings about the division of Syria. And it's not successful yet, and I hope that those discussions or direct Turkish-Israeli discussions via Azerbaijan or some other conduits will be successful, because Syria is the most important area of conflict. Turkey, it was mentioned already, they have interest in the south. They want basically a quite southern Syria in order to be able to export to the Arab countries. And this is why they want a railroad. This is, they may go back to the trucks that went south, and afterwards they were replaced by the Haifa port during the civil war. So there are also common interests. And the main reason to prevent an explosion, as was mentioned, is of course the United States that doesn't want its two allies to fight against each other. And truly, I don't think that Ankara, as well as Jerusalem, is interested in a military confrontation. That could be bloody, and there are two strong armies. Although I believe that we can do a good job, but still better not to enter this type of scenario. Unfortunately, nowadays we have strategic myopia in Washington on this issue. They are supporting the established regime, which is a group of jihadists. Turkey has supported jihadists in the past. Also, it is not fully aware of the dangers of the Turkish-Qatari axis. And basically they lack strategic clarity. and they could have played a much better role in bringing the two countries to some kind of strategic understanding on Syria, but they don't do that. Also, their ambassador in Turkey, Tom Burke, suffers from localitis, representing Turkish interests in Washington, rather than vice versa. The first thing that Israel should do is to try to coordinate with Washington. First of all, to overcome the Trump-Erdoğan so-called friendship, because this is not useful for Turkey, as far as I understand their relationship. This is not easy. Israel should be careful in not being seen as jeopardizing United States plans in Gaza or in Syria, and not to be seen pushing the US to war in Iran in order to have a better audience in the United States. Israel definitely has a nuisance value in this situation, and I think we should play this card very, very carefully. We should continue to use force in Syria to show determination and to strengthen our deterrence. I want to remind our audience that after the Marmara was stopped by force by the Israeli Navy, Turkey didn't send any ships anymore. They understood the language of force. The Turks have a real political lenses, and they understand that sending ships cross a red line of Israel, and they refrain from doing so. I think, and I'm suggesting several steps against Turkey, and those should be taken after serious consideration, because we don't want to have a more bitter relationship, but we should play hard. For example, we should use the lobbies in DC, in Washington, or the IPAC, the Greek lobby, the Cyprus lobby, the Armenian lobby, the Indian lobby. Indians don't like Turks nowadays because they supported Pakistan, and of course, whatever Kurdish lobby is there. I think we should initiate, if we decide on doing so, if the Turks do not consider enough our national interests, an aggressive PR campaign, and the themes are as follows. Erdogan is a dictator. Turkey moves to authoritarian regime. I think I'm sending you telegrams. Turkey helps terrorists, Hamas, ISIS, Islamic, radical movements. Turkey is not a safe place for US nuclear bombs at Incirlik. Turkey has nuclear ambitions, which will definitely destabilize the region. Turkey is allied with Pakistan, that is a friend of China. I think we can organize groups in the US and in Europe that demand democracy in Turkey. I think Israel should do its best to support, not directly, by other organs, secularist parties in Turkey, which are being suppressed by Erdogan. If the Ayatollahs regime fall in Iran, Israel will have a better access to the Kurds, and we can help them. And this is, of course, a Kurdish irredenta is a considerable threat on Turkey. I think that if necessary, we should obstruct the Turkish nuclear program. And Erdogan has declared several years ago, I believe 2017,
19.
fall of 2017.
19.
His ambitions for a nuclear bomb. In emergency, if it gets too far, we can destabilize Turkish economy by printing Turkish currency. This was done before in warfare history, and this can be done again. Also, the tourist sector of Turkey is very sensitive to quiet. Turkey gets over 60 million tourists a year, 12% of the Turkish GDP. If some unrest bombs on the Anatolian coast could reduce significantly the number of tourists. I certainly hope that we should discuss seriously with the Turks the situation and explain to them that despite the Turkey feels great, some speak about the Turkish century there, but they should be more modest, because we should be also modest. But we are not going to give in, not going to ignore threats, and we should not ignore. Words should not be dismissed as plain rhetoric. And the words coming now from Turkey are very threatening to Israeli ears. And I hope that our discussions will prevent miscalculation on both sides.
Thank you, Efraim. Well, a lot of things to chew. It's,
you know me.
All agree that on the one hand, we
always
have to be realistic and listen to what is coming out from both sides in rhetoric, that rhetoric can somehow be translated into action. And I think that definitely we are worried about the fact that we are confronting Turkey in every and each arena. And wherever you can say it also, that Turkey confronts Israel in every and each arena. Wherever they go, they see the Israelis. They go to the Horn of Africa. Here, the Israelis coming to Somaliland. They go to the the East Mediterranean. Israel is cooperating with Cyprus and Greece. Wherever they go, they see the Israelis, and wherever we go, we see the Turks. But one of the questions that was raised by the audience was, in face of under this background, wouldn't it be better for the United States to bring Israel and Turkey together and work out the opportunities, the possibilities of cooperation between two countries that are so close to the United States? And what is the role, one of the questions asked, what is the role of Tom Barak in this respect? Is he playing a positive role or not? So I ask our team to refer to these questions before we close. And let's start with Chai. What do you think about that?
I couldn't hear your question. Could you please repeat it?
What's the role of the US?
Is there a possibility that in spite of the fact that we confront each other all the time in every and each arena, isn't it a good idea for the United States to initiate an effort to bring together Israel and Turkey so that both concerns are going to be taken care of and the interests of both countries will be met by cooperation instead of confrontation?
Well,
the other question is, what is the role of Tom Barak in this respect?
I think that there is a mistrust for Tom Barak, especially in Israel. From Israeli eyes, he's a kind of a mouthpiece of the Turkish administration. I think that he's the best ever American ambassador that served in Turkey for Turkey's interests. That's what I can say. And it could be definitely a good idea to act as a bridge between Israel and Turkey, but as I already mentioned in my very short talk, that the Turkish administration unfortunately demonized the Israeli government. So for tango, you need two. First of all, the Turkish government should make a U-turn, and most importantly, since this delegitimization campaign is done on daily basis, they should explain to their public why they are doing this U-turn. And therefore, in order to do that, as far as I understand, they need to gain something very concrete in Gaza. And given the mistrust between Israel and Turkey, this is not going to be provided to Turkey because, unfortunately, Turkey is considered as a very, if not a hostile state now, it's an opponent of the state of Israel. And therefore, we are more or less stuck. And the best way to reinitiate this rapprochement, I think the ball is in the Turkish side, on the Turkish court. The Turkish administration should take steps because at the end they took all of these unilateral steps against the state of Israel. Israel did not deteriorate the relations with Turkey, but Turkey did. So we cannot ignore this fact.
Thank you. Hüseyin, what do you think about this idea?
First of all, thank you very much. It was a good discussion. Both Jonathan and Gabi, they contributed a lot. Efraim, as always. And with Eytan, I would ask Eytan to translate it into Hebrew or also in English. A Turkish proverb. Netanyahu ile Tayyip Erdoğan kayıkçı kavgası yapıyorlar.
Oh.
Yani ikisi de suyun üzerinde ayrı ayrı kayıklar.
Aynı kayığın üzerinde iki farklı istikamete mi gidiyorlar?
İki tane kayık var.
Please switch to English.
Next time we'll have a webinar in Turkish.
Okay. Now, Netanyahu and Erdoğan sitting in two different kayık. What is kayık?
Sira.
Yeah. And they shoot each other. It is not real. It is an artificial enmity. It is not structural one. It is not like the Turkish-Armenian conflict. It is not like Turkish-Greek conflict. It is not. So from this perspective, if both gentlemen are out of power one day, inshallah, then we will see how the things can change because it is artificial. It is a bubble in our historical relations. Nobody can tell me that the Turks have been from the very beginning having anti-Israeli views or anti-Semitic views. It is not the case. So it is a new phenomena in our relations. It is a new phenomena in the last 40 years, supported by Arab nationalism, by Muslim brothers, name it. But the world is changing, and definitely we take also our part of it. Barak is an ambassador, very interesting person coming from Lebanon. You know, in 1905, Lebanon was Ottoman part, and my mother, coming from Bulgaria, and my father from Macedonia, they were all Ottoman citizens. We lost an empire, and we still have this trauma. The Russians lost two empires. We lost one, thanks God. At least one is less traumatic than two. I think I would like to talk to Professor Gabi maybe in another thing. First of all, Turkey has not occupied Syria. Syria is an independent state, member of the United Nations. Turkey, together with Iran and Russia, had Astana process, and Turkey's territorial integrity is number one. According to United Nations 51 article, Turkey was trying to prevent borders coming from Kurdish PKK and YPG from Syria. So Turkey has had the right to defend itself. So Turkey has not occupied, but I tell you once again, Turkey has more than 4 million Syrians. We are the only country in the world which has per capita the most population as migrants here in this country. So many things change. We have to adjust themselves to the new conditions and see how these new emerging problems can be solved. I'm also realist, like Jonathan also. Jonathan, thank you very much. It was a very good, I would say, presentation. I share many views. And also concerning the view that Turkey is having, that there is a Turkish general, this is Turkoman. It's not Turkic, it is Turkoman, and Turkoman is part of Turkish population in Syria. And by the way, Syria has been so many years of course under Ottoman territory. It has nothing to do with the neo-Ottomanism. All this nonsense discussions. Turkey is going to have neo-Ottoman things. Look here, in the United Nations today, we have 26 countries. 26 countries which were just part of the Ottoman Empire 150 years ago. We lost an empire, and the empire lose their generations. They have always, like von der Leyen just said, we have the nostalgia to Europe we had before. Today, look what Europe is having. A lot of troubles. Turkey is a secular country, still constitutionally. Turkey is a democratic country. Despite all the difficulties that we face, Turkey cannot be changed into any Arab country or into any Iran country. We are not. Genetically, we do not belong to this. It is different. And I think not only putting, I would say, Timothy Garton Ash or Niall Ferguson, or let me put it like this, maybe Francis Fukuyama, concerning the identity. We have all identity troubles. Every empire has identity problems. And these Kurdish uprisings, I can tell you, in Turkey, we had 46 years fight against PKK terrorism. PKK has lost, just lost. Turkey is the winner. And we paid billions of dollars for this. And this Kurdish irredentism, I said this also just yesterday in Halk TV. Turkey is not Syria. Turkey is not Iraq. Turkey is not Iran. Turkey has Article 66, which makes every people living in Turkey, like in the United States of America, Turkish citizen. And in Turkey, there will be no Kurdish state, I can tell you, because none of the Muslim groups in Turkey, having different ethnic groups, they will be not having any special status. It will be not given, not now, not in 1,000 years time. But we have to see what happens in the area. And I think the Israeli politics, 2023, just before Hamas attacked, it was a meeting in United Nations between Netanyahu and Tayyip Erdoğan. Okay, Netanyahu had a tie, red, white T-shirt, okay, which symbolizing the Turkish flag. He was just on the way to come to Turkey in October before Hamas attacked. I mean, probably would come. And before it, Efraim, Yossi, the Israeli President Isaac Herzog came to Ankara from Atatürk Mausoleum to Külliye, where president is living. 110 Turkish soldiers riding on the horses were escorting the president. Your flag, Israeli flag, has been in the presidential palace. And Isaac Herzog and Erdogan had wonderful talks. I mean, we forget actually that we had much better relations. And I can tell you, the alliance building between Greece, Egypt, and Republic of Cyprus, it does not function. I mean, whatever the Greeks and this Republic of Cyprus, they do, don't fall into the trap. What? I mean, Israel, Greece and Republic of Cyprus can do, yeah. We are number 2 in NATO. We have number 2 army, and our army is more experienced than Israeli one in this case. Sending the troops everywhere in the world, and fighting is not laboratorium army. Concerning the Somaliland, I think it is good point. Maybe I should tell you something. Somali and Turkey has good relations, and Turkey was arbitrating between Ethiopia and Somali. Somaliland is another issue. It is new one, like Greenland for Donald Trump. Suddenly, Somaliland became important. Nobody was talking about this, but Somalia as a state, Turkey is establishing there for the space research, and Turkey will do this probably in coming years, that there will be some space shuttles, Turkish origin, will be sent into orbit. I think what Gabi said, Turkish lira is very valuable in Syria. This is wrong. Turkish lira is very bad at the moment. Don't trust to Turkish lira. We suffer, the academics, under this. This is, you should bring another argument, I would say. Not Turkish lira, I can tell you. But he's
Hüseyin,
right.
we have to finish, so please.
Yes, but he's right in one point. And the Turkish-Israeli security interest, where they come together and where they are colliding. This is important. And I finish with this. From now on, let's talk in 5 years' time. Let's talk in 10 years' time about Turkish-Israel relations. I can tell you that this is an anomaly, what we have now. It is not the real one. It is not the real structure of the Turkish-Israeli relations. Point.
Thank you, Hüseyin.
Sorry, talking too much.
Well, it's not too much. And we have, see, Alex Greenberg joined us. He just published a paper about the Turkish position regarding the crisis in Iran. So maybe you want to say a word about that, but we are really running out of time, Alex, so be extremely short.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Bağcı. I just have a query, not a question, because it is nothing new for you. Look, we understand very well that Syria has always been part of the Ottoman Empire. There were trains from Haleb to Istanbul, and etc., etc. Yet our concern is not that Turkey controls Syria, but Turkey doesn't mind that Turkey's supporters will slaughter everyone else in Syria. That's first. Second, I read Turkish. Of course, not as good as Eytan Yanarocak, but I can see full of most anti-Semitic expressions like Yahudi çıkarları, Jewish interest, İsrail'in kirli, İran'daki İsrail'in kirli oyunu, dirty Israel's plans in Iraq, şer çetesi, the evil gang, Mossad bağlantılı, etc., etc. It's not only in Yeni Shafak, and also such books as Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's everywhere. So my only wish is that you must understand we cannot, I don't claim it represents all the Turks, but it is very present, and no one in Turkey can expect us to ignore that. That's all. Thank you.
Yes,
Okay,
but
thank you very much.
I told in the beginning, I was talking to your ambassador in Ankara, David, in the 90s. I said, David, in 30 years' time, here in this country, we will have more Islamist newspapers, televisions, radios. So it was a tendency which I could see. But you said one point, this is good, Alex. Not everything Turkey is thinking like this. And
sorry, it's not only Islamist.
Please,
it's not only Islamist.
Talk about Yeni Shafak. Who reads Yeni Shafak in Turkey? How many people? How many people watch Yeni Shafak television? Come on. It is not mainstream. If you tell me the mainstream is this, then I would agree, but it is not. Yeni Shafak, Sabah, all this, it is not. If the other newspapers like Cumhuriyet, Hürriyet, or Milliyet, do you see there any things like this? No.
Of course. Sorry.
I also see.
Of course. Sorry.
Show me which.
Well, let's. We have to finish. So I'm sorry that the heated debate is open, and I call upon everybody to put an reactions to the webinar that's going to be published on JISS, what he thinks about what's going on Cumhuriyet and the other Milliyet and so on and so forth. And I really want to thank all the experts. We just ran out of time. It's not typical for JISS webinars. We usually finish on time. But this time the topic is so heated and controversial that we had to give people enough time to express their views. And let's just hope that somehow the Americans will know how to manage this conflict and to make sure that the real concerns, not the artificial concerns, but the real concerns of both sides are going to be respected, and that we shall avoid further confrontation, and we shall go back to the good old days when we were friends. And as Hussein says, this can happen, so I hope he's right. Although I'm worried that not in the foreseeable, not in the immediate future. In the immediate future, we might see more tensions. Thank you very much to all the participants, and we shall see you in the next webinar of JISS. Thank you.
Hussein.
Yes, bye bye. Good evening to all of you.
Hüseyin hocam görüşmek üzere.
Görüşmek üzere. Çok çok teşekkürler. Sağ olun.
Bye bye.
Görüşmek üzere.
Bye bye.